Welcome back to the Threshold. I'm here to share about July 11th's inaugural circle. We had 13 people in attendance. Thanks to each and every one of you who attended. Thanks to each and every one of you who intended to attend. For safety, the helping spirits had me build a grid that when people walked through the threshold of the space, it acted as a sieve. That those good, true, beautiful ancestors, the ones who rose up to meet the challenges of their time in a good way, entered the space. Those ancestors who weren't cultivated how to meet the challenges of their time in a good way couldn't make it through the sieve. In my imagination, they're just kind of wandering around the corner of 28th and S. Kind of waiting for their wards to return. I think it's a funny visual, but I thought it was so potent. The first of the 4 things that we do in Threshold is we do a greeting. One of my teachers expressed this necessity for letting the road dust settle. And in situations like this, when we're going to do work with each other, community work, and we're trying to create a safe container for this unsafety, and we need to say, yeah, some guy almost hit me on the way here. We need to let that dissipate so that we can be present. That's how we shake off the road dust. So we took time to greet each other. But this part is what's necessary. This is what breaks us open, and people call it an icebreaker, right? But that's the ice that we keep to keep ourselves in the winter of ourselves. But we want to enter into community, which is a summer, so we do need that ice to melt. And I'm not talking about breaking it. I'm just talking about letting it melt a little bit, so that we can start feeling safe. Part 2 is you are here. So here's where you are. On July 11th was the day after the full moon. So there's a kind of 2 to 3 day period after a full moon where the effects of the full moon are pretty much still what we're up to. The full moon was in Capricorn, and it was moving into Aquarius when we met. The moon in Capricorn was very much saying, show up to your work. Show up to your work. And so there was a gratitude for those who did, or those who intended to. Intentions you place on the dark of the moon, intentions that you place as the moon begins to start, are things that can come to fruition with the moon's fullness. The full moon brings clarity. It can also bring chaos. It can also bring confusion. And that has a lot to do with the intentions that you begin with. So the moon was at its point in its cycle where it just ovulated. And now the hormones are starting to change. And for the moon, we're talking about a tonal shift, right? Because the moon isn't a person. The next you are here is the earth. The earth is in summer. The seasons, as I understand them, are through the arcane, you can call it pagan, method of looking at it, which is there are 4 holidays. They are Imbolc, February 2nd, Beltane, May 1st, Lunasa, which I always do August 4th, but it's like the 4th to the 2nd to the 4th, and then Samhain, which is of course October 31st. Those are the high holy days. And then we have the ones that everyone also knows about, which are the midway points between those seasons. Those are the solstices and the equinoxes. The reason that those solstices and equinoxes are understood as the midpoints is because they are the moments of most balance and most extremity. And think about what happens in springtime. So it depends on where you're located regionally. But on February 2nd, we start to see the thaw happen, which means those seeds that are in the ground are starting to root down. Oh, here, my little hand roots can help. They're starting to root down. And then as spring equinox happens, we start to get hotter and more regular sun. And in Beltane, May 1st, we're starting to see a first leaf. That's seeing the eggs on the ovaries of the earth. So when solstice happens, it is like, I'm ovulating. Yeah. So we are 3 weeks past ovulation, which means we're starting to slow down. We're starting to have the progesterone moment. The earth is starting to slow down, and you're looking around and you're like, no, it's not. Okay, it is. So the third aspect of you are here. Third aspect of you are here. Astrology. We gotta know what the planets are doing, right? Because that affects us. These magnets in the sky doing their cycles. No, I'm over here, I'm over there. So all of the planets, I need a disclaimer here. I am not an astrologer. I am learning. So we have had some massive shifts in the outer lying planets. By that I mean Jupiter all the way to Pluto. A retrograde is kind of like when you're in a relationship and then you break up and you know exactly why you broke up and you're starting to move on, and then you think like, maybe I'm gonna text my ex. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And then you do it, and then you do it and you're like, oh yeah, that's what I learned. And then you move on again. That's kind of what the planets do when they retrograde. They kind of like go back to the themes of where they came from. And my understanding of it is like to quantify kind of what was, and then to station direct again and get back into the flow of what is. I think it's a really necessary looking back experience to say, this is what got me to now. And offer gratuity for it, and also be able to extrapolate the understanding from it. So Jupiter just changed houses into Cancer. That's where it's home, which means great. Jupiter is a benefic. It's good. Jupiter wants to help. It expands, it brings abundance, and it's in Cancer, which Cancer is like wants to create a home, a safe home. So there's an amount of safety that we're getting from that placement, which is helpful with the rest of the placements, because Saturn is in Aries. Saturn is very much about getting your work done, about doing it the right way, well, doing it in a good way, being diligent and persistent and consistent, having good boundaries. And Aries wants to ram their head into everything impulsively and go and do and trust and just do and go and be. And Saturn is like, can you get your shit together? Can you chill out and have some patience? And Aries is like, patience is not necessary because I know what to do. And Saturn is like, so there's a bit of challenge in that, and it's retrograding. Uranus, the week of Threshold Circle, the Monday before, changed houses. So Uranus stays in each sign for not change houses, my apologies, change signs. Uranus stays in each sign for 7 years, which means that it takes 84 years for it to be back where it was the moment you were born. The previous times Uranus was in Gemini, where it is now, we had American Civil War, American Revolution. So big things can happen. Uranus is a great disruptor. It can cause things to be in upheaval. And it's in Gemini, which is an air sign, which is like mental realms and how we think about things. But Gemini is also ruled by Mercury, which also speaks to technology. speaks to communication. So if it's an air sign, which talks about your mental realms, but it's also ruled by Mercury, which talks about communication, this is very much where is the difference between the thoughts and what actually comes out. But Uranus also talks about collective work. So we can see, and as we see with those previous times that it was in this placement in Gemini, those big revolutions that occurred on collective levels. So big things are on the horizon for the next 7 years. Neptune is also in Aries, retrograding. There are big changes afoot. Those bigger planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Neptune takes something like 164 years to go through all the signs. You will likely only experience Neptune and Aries this once. I mean, unless there's some big technological advances that come out of this Uranus and Gemini. Unless there's some big changes that allow us to live like exceedingly longer, probably not going to see Neptune and Aries again in your lifetime. But I'm not going to put it past what's going on right now. The reason we do the You Are Here is so that you can look at, where am I in my cycle? What is cycling in my life? Because when lessons come up for us, they often come up in this way. They start at the head and they work their way through the body to the tail, and then we eat them again and we start it all over again. The Ouroboros is this arcane pictograph for what it is to cycle through our pain and our lessons. This is why I offer that You Are Here, so that you can start to understand, where am I in space and time? Where's my body? Where are my cycles in space and time? And how do the cycles of what's going on in space and time affect what I can do? And can I make decisions accordingly? This is a thing that society does not wholly support, right? But what we can do is offer grace and compassion. All right, now you know where you are. The next thing we're going to share about is the work. The work. Quan Yin brought us our work, the first activity, and I have big, big, big thanks to her elevated. So many plants fill that space, and the very first thing that Quan Yin had us do was sit in front of a plant and talk to them. Hello, plant. But we did it in our minds. So it was like, did you hear all that? Hello, plant, you're so beautiful. I see your new bright green growth. And then they heard a bell. And then they began to listen. Those in attendance started to listen to their plants. And they were encouraged to recognize, when you listen to plants, they often communicate to you in a way that you will understand. That means you might have racing thoughts. You might think of a song might come into your head. You might feel or sense or see a color. You might have a memory come up. You might have nothing. It might just be silent, peaceful silence. Plants communicate to us in ways that we can understand. Nature communicates to us in ways that we can understand. It's, we'll call it telepathic because that's the word that humans have for it. It's not really an extra sense. It's a natural sense. But they communicate with us telepathically. And we don't all have a frame of reference for telepathic communication. We don't all acknowledge that we all have this natural latent skill. So we don't totally know how to understand the plant's method of communication. So those things that come up, like a song, the songs speak to us. They elicit a feeling, an understanding, And that is how the plant is telling us what it wants us to know. If you are doing this work at home and you want to sit with the plants, we did about 3 minutes. So you can set a timer. About 3 minutes of talking and 3 minutes of listening. But the listening, there is no doing it wrong. Just be with the plant. And if you get nothing, that's something. Nothingness is both pregnant and empty. Okay, so the next part of our work, a pile of fabric and threads were plopped down, and everyone was instructed to take one. They were instructed to sit with their thread and feel it, notice the texture, and then a question was posed to them. So if you want to do this part at home, find a thread, find a piece of fabric. You'll know it when you touch it, when you see it. Maybe you don't have something like that. So maybe it's a whole shirt. Maybe it's a whole pair of old period panties. Maybe it's an old sock. Sit with it. This is the question that was posed as they held their fabric and examined it and looked at it and felt its texture. When in my childhood did I not receive the compassion that I needed? And that question morphs. How am I not receiving the compassion I need now? Where in my life am I not receiving the compassion I need now? And then that led to a final question. Do I know what compassion is? This is one question. You're like, you just asked 4 questions. Yeah, it's one question. And the question is, when did I not receive the compassion I needed? Was it in childhood? Because if it was in childhood, it's definitely still now. Unless you've done a massive amount of healing work. And to you, I say, thank you. If you had it in childhood, then where do you not have it now? And maybe it's not, maybe it's from you. Maybe you are not supplying it. Or maybe it's not being supplied by your partner or your friends or your job. And then it morphs, the question morphs again into, do I even know what compassion is? Because the reality is, if you can't answer that question about your childhood as a yes, I had it, or no, I did not have it, and if you cannot answer that question of your current life, yes, I have it, or no, I do not have it, then the actual question is, do I even have a relationship with compassion? Do I even know compassion? Have I met compassion? What do they look like? What color is their hair? The lesson in this work is understanding, do I have a relationship with compassion, and what is it? When did it start? When did I understand it? How do I recognize it in my body? And that leads to the next part of the work. So for a little while, I posed that question and had people look at or feel or lay with their fabric, and I played the drum for them. I just walked around drumming, letting it resonate, letting that wounding or that emptiness or that fullness or that compassion or those memories or those questions fill them. If you wanted to do this at home, I will share a link in the video to a drum track that I like on Spotify, so you can play a drum if you would like to do this at home. So the next thing that we did was we sat in front of someone else and we held our fabric and we made eye contact with them, which is just something we don't do with strangers, and even hardly with our beloveds, because it's uncomfortable and it's hard. The work was to hold the feeling of the relationship with compassion, whether you were missing it as a kid or had it as a kid, whether you're missing it as an adult, have it as an adult, or if you even know what it is, you hold that. Hold it in your brain to the best of your ability, and you look at the other person while they're holding with the best of their ability and looking. And the looking is uncomfortable. So if you want to do this by yourself, get a mirror. If you want to do it with a friend, try it. That work is powerful. We did it for 3.5 minutes, which, for saying sake, feels like forever. I'm sure you're wondering, like, did you just let people pair off and stay with people that they knew and came with and might be comfortable with? Absolutely not, is the answer to that question. No, I did not let that happen. Spirit, Quan Yin, specifically told me that I would pair people up. She said that I would match colors. Did I see colors? No, I did not. I heard them. What? How do you hear colors? I know. There's a whole name for it too. It's like synesthesia or something. It was so interesting how people were paired. In fact, 2 participants, a mother and daughter, were each paired. The daughter was paired with a woman who had the same name as her previous relationship. The mother was paired with a person who had the same name as her previous relationship. The similarities of the people in front of them to their previous relationships were uncanny. They had physical similarities and a same name. Colors matching. It was wild. There were people who were challenged by social interaction, get a lot of social anxiety, and they were paired with someone who was very gentle. I see that as an acknowledgement. I see you, Spirit says. I'm giving you what you can handle. There were 2 people paired who both their fabrics had holes in them. One person's was black with holes, the other person's was white with holes. And they had very similar childhood experiences of having a holy experience of compassion, like moments where they needed compassion, but they did not receive it and it left holes. There was one person who got a piece of fabric who, when they actually set it down and looked at it, was a square that had an entire circle cut out of it. And that was how they felt, like one giant hole had been punched in them, and that was where the compassion was missing. Because they were so different. Their needs and their skills and their gifts were so different than what their family was like. And their family didn't know how to integrate acceptance for that and have compassion for that. They didn't understand it. And so that person grew up feeling like, I just have this big hole where I needed compassion. The fabric that each person chose was so telling to their relationship with compassion. One woman had lost a child, and she consciously closed her eyes and reached into the pile, and the piece of fabric she chose was a ribbon that was short. It had a short life. It was satin on one side and matte on the other, and it was her daughter's favorite color. These experiences are telling. One woman recognized that her missing compassion was definitely not in childhood. She acknowledged that her husband could be intimate with her, be sexual with her, but that hugging her wasn't easy for him, embracing her, holding her, nurturing her in that type of compassionate way. As she picked up her piece of fabric, it was black and white, and it was shaped like a pair of panties. The fabric choices were highly telling, and interestingly, so were the plant choices. For the next 3.5 minutes, we traded threads and we held the other person's. And for 3.5 minutes, we closed our eyes and we felt. We felt what that person had put in there. And for some people, they felt compassion for the other person. And for some people, they felt the pain of the other person. And some people got actual images and visions of the other person's lived experience. And some people got songs. Multiple people got songs. The final activity in the work was we sat in a circle and we took our thread in front of us and we pushed it to the center. So each thread made a straight line from our bodies into the center of the circle. And every person was to fill their body with compassion. And when their body was filled with compassion, when they provided it for themselves, they were to push it out of their body into the cord and into the center of the circle. People were encouraged to recognize that they may have missing compassion, they may not even understand their relationship with compassion, and that this might not be something that even makes sense to them. Not just the practice of generating compassion and filling your body with it, but also pushing it out. Even less than that, what does it even feel like to feel compassion in my body? Because I don't know if I recognize compassion. Quan Yin had me go around the circle and walk behind people and empower people who were struggling. And there was a thing that she asked me to do called keening, where I wore a black shroud and wept on behalf of people, grieved for them, wailed for them, cried for them. Let that energy begin to move on their behalf. This sent a bit of a shockwave through the people because everyone recognized what was happening differently. Some people commented that they needed to be able to do that in their own life and hadn't had the space or the time, hadn't had the right environment. Some people commented that when they heard it, they felt it, and it loosed something for them. One person commented that they wanted to turn around and comfort me. There was medicine. Quan Yin was able to say, you came here because you're learning this language. It's a whole new language for your body, and you recognized it and you felt it. So you are now tasked with taking what you felt and taking it out into the world, out into your life, and recognizing when you need it and fostering, regenerating that feeling for yourself. That is how you begin that relationship. This circle is for all skill levels. The point of Threshold is it is a workshop space. It is a place for us to come calibrate. It is a place for us to test and extrapolate from those tests. It's a place for us to recognize where we are and thus help us see what we need to practice and where we need to go. So we come to Her Elevated, which is mostly a place where people do yoga and lift weights, and we do strength training on our spiritual muscles, and we learn how to grow them by being unsafe, by tearing them so they get stronger, and we practice what it is to have empathy, to have compassion. That's what we did this time. I can't tell you what we're going to do next time because I haven't even asked yet. Next time is August 8th at her elevated Lionsgate. You got to get on down here. Okay, part 4. We did sharing. And just to make the circle way more scary, everybody has to share. That's right. I saved time for everyone to get to share. And what's important about sharing is that we don't really even know what we just did or how it affected us or what we just got from it or what we learned until we start reflecting on it. So when you begin to share, you recognize the places that it affected you and what you got from it. And the question was posed during the sharing, what are we supposed to share about? Great question. Maybe you want to, and my answer was, I don't know. I have no idea what you'll share. I don't know what this experience was like for you. And so the response was like, maybe you'll share about why you chose the plant you chose. Maybe you'll show what you noticed from the plant. Maybe you'll share what you heard when you listened to the plant. Maybe you'll talk about the wounding around not having the compassion you needed. Maybe you'll talk about why you chose the fabric you chose. Maybe you'll talk about what it was like to look in somebody else's eyes. Maybe you'll talk about what it was like to hold someone else's fabric and feel their experience. Maybe you'll talk about how it was impossible for me to feel compassion in my body. That just didn't work. None of this worked. And maybe that's what you want to say. Maybe you want to talk about how this annoyed you. And everyone shared something. Some people shared very intimately, and some people shared intimately poetically, and some people shared barely, and some people said, I didn't really connect with the work. I didn't really know what I was doing. And as questions were posed to them, we got to the heart of the matter. This work has a tendency to get under your skin, and it can make you really hungry or really tired, or it can consume your thoughts, or it's something that you notice you're trying to like push away from your thoughts. But that's why we show up, right? To be challenged. So I do want to thank everyone who showed up. And for those of you who did show up and are watching this, please feel free to share in the comments what your experience was like now that you've sat with it for a little while. And maybe perhaps you understand even more about what happened in that circle from this follow-up. And for those of you who are doing this at home, I'm wanting to say that when we did the part where we pushed the compassion in our bodies and pushed it out through the cord, there was a moment where after the keening, Spirit said, some people don't quite understand how to do this and you need to go further. And we did a yoga nidra type practice where I was instructed to guide people from the crown of their head, bringing compassion into their body from their crown, down through their forehead, behind their eyes, down into their ears and their nose, filling their teeth, each tooth, filling their tongue. And we did this all the way through the body. They were guided to consciously bring compassion into their body. So I wanted to explain that that aspect of Yoga Nidra did come in, that practice did come in to make that more accessible to people. And if you are doing this work at home and you do want a guided meditation to help this aspect of it, I would happily do a follow-up video and share with you guys. So if you want to say anything in the comments or reach out to me directly, can you do that on YouTube? Look, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I am so green. Well, I used to be so green. Now I'm just kind of pukey. Additionally, I wanted to explain that the fabric, as it was in the center of the circle, making these kind of this wheel spoke, everyone was invited to either take their fabric with them as a reminder to put on their altar, to put on their keychain, whatever, however they wanted to interact with it, or they were welcome to leave it in the burn barrel in the center of the circle and I would burn it up for them. And I would say about half of the people wanted to burn that up and the other half wanted to hold on to it. So That is helpful to those of you who are doing this work at home, how you want to interact with that fabric afterwards. I encourage each of you who attended and those of you who are doing this work on your own to really look at, why did you choose that plant? What about it drew you in? And maybe, how is it a comment on where you are? Same with your fabric. All right, so the last bit that we discussed and I want to share here in this moment is about sacred reciprocity. So I encourage you to appreciate what you're there doing. We ask $10. If you cannot, do not. If you can, offer more. My lived experience of attending ecstatic dances is this. Sometimes I would pay to attend. Sometimes I would volunteer and do work and get in on a work trade. And sometimes I would be gifted. When I danced my prayers, when I went there to do that work, that movement work with myself, if I paid, I had this exuberant dance that was unstoppable. And I hate when people use this word. I don't like food adjectives to describe physical experiences, but it was juicy, okay? I did it. I did the thing I hate. I am learning how to be comfortable with my discomfort. When I bartered, I had this very intimate dance, this very ludal dance, this very almost dark of the moon dance, because it was for me. I invested in it. I knew how it was created, and then I got it for free. But I didn't get it for free. I labored. I got it for labor. And therefore, I had done something to do it. And that changed my dance. When I got it just as a gift, it was almost nearly empty. Almost nearly. It was that pregnant thing. Pregnant and empty. It was mysterious. It was almost like I didn't quite know how to connect with it because I didn't have a direct connection. So the appreciation that you offer for the circle, sometimes you give the 10 and then a month goes by and you are like, holy guacamole, that has really rippled out. And then you do that sacred thing where you Venmo me $10 more because you want to double your appreciation. Or you do that other sacred thing, which is to share this circle with other people in your life. Sharing what we're doing in Threshold is a way of offering reciprocity. I was so impressed by the questions that people asked and the pairings of the people and the plants and their messaging and the threads that people chose. There was one person who said, I know we were only supposed to focus on one plant, but I was looking at this one plant and it was so tall and everything was so uniform and it all grew so well and it was perfect. And then I started noticing the plants around it, and I started talking to these other two plants, and they had no problems with their leaves splitting and they had no problem growing wonky and lopsided, and it helped me recognize that I didn't need to be perfect. That how I grew was perfect to me. That I was perfect if my leaves split and I grew sideways. That I didn't need to grow straight and tall and evenly balanced. And then they were tested with that, because when they started working with another person, their phone notification went off. It was ringing through the space. And they were like, I accept my imperfection right now. And I didn't handle that well. And I don't mean I got upset or anything. I just said, hey, if it's yours, you can go turn it off. I didn't even need to acknowledge it. I felt that I didn't need to acknowledge it, and I still did. And I still did because I felt everyone in the room being like, do we need to acknowledge this? And I was like, well, if anyone's going to acknowledge it, I'm the one that would have to acknowledge it. But what my true, what I heard was, let it go. Let it be. and they gave themselves compassion for that happening, and they acknowledged it later, and it was so beautiful. And I recognized that I failed that person, and in a way the group too, and I'm okay with it. In fact, I feel compassion for it because I'm learning how to facilitate this. I don't know how to do this. I'm learning astrology, I'm learning how to facilitate, I'm learning how to make videos, and I'm learning how to let you be taught by your ancestors, by me standing up and finding my footing with you are here and here are your lessons. I was so blessed, and I'm so grateful to each of you.